Doing well? Yeah? Man, I am tired. Tired. And for those of you who don't know why, man, we had our first demo day at the new facility yesterday. Man, I'm telling you, you just need to drive by it. You just need to drive by, look in the windows. What was there isn't there, and what's still supposed to be there is still there. So, hey, great first day of demo, right? I'm telling you, the only thing left is just big old huge piles of like wood and junk and trash, and we just need you to pick that up. That's all we need. So you can take one day, you can take another day, you can take another day, and then we'll be done by that. How about that? Yeah, right? I mean, I'm telling you, it was amazing to see yesterday, and I got to let you know a little bit into this, because this past week, I think God kind of opened my eyes a little bit to His favor. And that may be not a word that you're familiar with, especially if you're not a church person. If you didn't grow up in church, that might not be something that you're familiar with. But that we kind of write some of that stuff off sometimes as good luck, when I really think that it's God's favor, like He's shining His favor down. And I really do believe that He's shining His favor down on our church, because it was a miracle that we were even in that facility doing demo yesterday. Right? It's a miracle that we're even here and able to do that, because I kind of want to let you in and let you hear a little bit more of the story, and we're going to celebrate this a little bit. We're getting to Galatians, I promise, but I just got to celebrate this a little bit, because I need you to know that we're only here by the favor of God. That's it. This has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with a group of people that say, you know what, let's just love God and love people, and God will do the rest. Right, that's pretty much just what we do every time. But I need you to know about this deal with the new facility. Because at one point, at the very beginning processes of this, it was pretty much a dead end. Like, I mean, it was pretty much the relationship between us and the building owner. It was pretty much a non-existent relationship. Like, he was probably one of those, it's my way or the highway guys, and take it or leave it. And what he was putting on the table for us to take, like, we knew we didn't need to take it, so we were like, I guess we're going to have to leave it. And it was just one thing after another that we're sitting here and we're going, oh my gosh, we need more room. We need more space. But it was almost like we were stuck here because that wasn't working out. No other place in the city was working out, and we were just stuck in the rec center. How many of you know what it feels like to be stuck? But you know what it feels like. Traffic jams. Dude, I'm telling you, being in traffic, I have an anger level in traffic that I didn't even know I was capable of. I'm telling you, I will slit somebody's tire. I got to be careful, because this is the service that we film. Man, people will make a heyday out of that on social media and on the internet. So slit somebody's tire, like that would work. Let's go with that. I mean, it just drives me nuts. So I was thinking, like, coming back from Arkansas to Enterprise one day, and we were on 65 South, and in between Birmingham and Montgomery, and we were in the minivan. So how many of you know you can at least go 30 miles an hour over the speed limit in a minivan? A cop does not want anything to do with your crying, screaming kids in the back. That's why they stay away from minivans. So you should get a minivan. So we were we were flying. It was, and then all of a sudden we went from to, and I don't know about you, but I don't think that should happen on the interstates. Like, I just really don't. I just think we should just fly and get to where we're supposed to be going the way that we're supposed to be going. But I'm talking like a halt, like a put your car in park and sit there for 45 minutes of a traffic jam. Now, how many of you know I'm not the happiest person in the world when this comes up? Man, I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh my gosh, like, let's do something already. And you're thinking, okay, there's probably a wreck up there. I got to be sensitive. I got to be compassionate to other people. No, how many of you, when you sit in that traffic jam and you finally, start going, how many of you look for what caused the traffic jam? Yeah. I didn't see anything at all. No, tire, marks going off the road, no car in a ditch, no fire anywhere, no windshield wiper that fell off of a car that everybody's looking at, nothing. I didn't see anything. So it's frustrating me, and I feel stuck in that moment. And you're sitting there waiting for 45 minutes, and all of us know what that feels like. Every single one of us knows what it feels like to be stuck. But we also know what it feels like to break free from that. Right? You know, you're sitting in that traffic jam, and you're bumper to bumper, nobody's moving, and people start kind of easing forward. Right? And it takes a little bit, it takes a minute, people start getting gaps, and how many of you, when you get a gap, you take it? Right? I'm the pedal to the floorboard kind of a guy. In the minivan, can't do that in the Jeep. But in the minivan, it's like, and I'm going. That moment that it's pedal to the floorboard, it's the best feeling ever. It really is. And if you don't believe me, you should try it. When you pull out today, just pedal to the metal, right? If you get stopped, don't blame me. But it's the greatest feeling ever when you can break free from something that you're stuck in. And I'm telling you, going through this process, getting into this building, it really just felt like we were stuck. But there was a moment where something happened. I don't know what it was. I can't explain anything. But the demeanor between the building owner and us, it all started to change. In that moment of breakthrough, it was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Like it's starting to go somewhere. We're starting to go somewhere. So negotiations start happening. Everything start kind of laying out. And what I didn't know, you learn more things every day. What I didn't know is that the price that he told us to rent this facility was almost half of what he told somebody else. Come on, that's a big deal. That is God's favor shining down on our church. And then not even that, that's good in and of itself, but I had a conversation with him this past week. And he kind of sent me an email and he said, hey, when are you guys going to be done with the renovations and all that? And I was like, you're kind of working with contractors and all that junk like that. So I don't know. And he said, well, hey, give me a call at 11. Now, the way that our relationship was prior, I didn't know what to expect at that phone call at 11. But I got on the phone with him and I was like, hey, he said, I think we need to start talking about when the date starts for you guys to pay the lease and pay the rent. And I was like, yeah, we should probably talk about that because it's probably beneficial for both of us to know that date. And we started kind of talking through that process. And I was like, but we haven't paid you yet. We signed the lease like a month and a half ago now. I can't even remember, maybe even longer than that, but we haven't even paid you yet. How's that working? And he said, well, I didn't want you guys to have to pay us while you were doing the renovations. Come on, somebody, that's good. That's good. So we start having this conversation. He's going, I've already got it approved right now. I don't know your end date to the renos, but I've got it approved right now where you won't have to pay rent until August 1st. How many months is that? 2.5. Let me just tell you something. That's thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars. And here, this has nothing to do with him. It has nothing to do with us, man. That is God's favor on this church. Man, I'm telling you, when you go from that position of being stuck to that position of being a little bit free in that moment, listen, it felt like I was in jail doing all that junk, negotiating and talking, and it wasn't going anywhere, and we were hitting brick walls left and right. And then the moment that we stood in that place yesterday, man, I looked out at the 8 o'clock crew. It was probably 9 o'clock when I kind of stood back and I kind of looked for a second, and we had 25, 30 people there tearing down walls in a facility that's going to be ours, that we're going to be able to make it what we want it to be and not have to set up and tear down all the time. We can just walk in that place and watching 25, 30 folks in our facility doing that. But I remembered the 5 people sitting around a kitchen table when this first thing got started. Let me just tell you, that's God's favor. You don't go from 5 people around a kitchen table to running right around 270 or 280 on a Sunday without God. It just doesn't happen. And that's His favor on our church, and I need you to realize that favor on our church. Because when you realize that favor, when you're living in that favor, it feels like freedom. Right? It doesn't feel like you're stuck anymore. It feels like freedom. And listen, that's what I want for you. That's what we're experiencing right now in this season as a church, but that's what I want for you as an individual. I want us to live in absolute freedom. Okay, I want us to live in absolute freedom. So that's kind of why we're going through this book of Galatians. I told you last week that this is the first time in the history of Church With You that we've done a book study. We just normally don't do it. We normally take topics that you're dealing with and I'm dealing with and try to live some of that stuff out and figure out how to do it the way Jesus wants us to do it. And we kind of do it that way, but I figured, you know what, if we want to live in absolute freedom, then we need to go to a book that talks about freedom. And listen, I'm telling you, Galatians is that book. You talk about a book that talks about how to live your life in freedom, it's the book of Galatians. So we started that last week, and Paul kind of in chapter 1, he kind of took us on, and he says, hey, there's really two gospels. And it kind of freaked some of us out because we were like, there's more than one. I just thought there was one. There's two gospels, but he said one of them isn't really even a gospel at all. And we broke it down last week, and we said the one that's not really a gospel at all, we would sum that up into one word, and we would call it religion. Right? Because when you're living in religion, you're living in chains and in bondage because you're going, oh my gosh, I got to do this, I got to do this, got to do this. And if I don't do all of these things really well, then God won't love me as much as he would if I did all these things good. And you're living in this constant state of, am I good enough to earn God's love? Listen, that's never the state that we were meant to live in. But the other gospel is the gospel of relationship. Dude, you just got to have a relationship with Jesus. And that's what Paul says in Galatians chapter 1. And then he starts to say it again in Galatians chapter 2. So if you got a Bible, Galatians chapter 2, verse 16, then we're going to jump down to verse 19. If you don't have one, that's going to be up here on the screen for you as well. And he says this. He says, freedom comes through a relationship with Jesus. Watch how he says this. He says, we know very well that we're not set right with God by rule keeping, but only through personal faith in Jesus Christ. Don't you see that? Don't you love that? I mean, we're not set right with God by keeping a bunch of rules. Because how many of you know I'm not good at that? Like I break speed limits. Like I do that. Like I'm not good at keeping a whole bunch of rules. And he says, hey, we're not set right with God through keeping rules. He's talking about those two gospels again. We're not set right living in religion. You're set right living in a relationship with Jesus through personal faith in Jesus Christ. How do we know? Right? That's what he said. How do we know? How do we know? We know because we tried it. Look what Paul says. We tried it, and we had the best system of rules the world had ever seen. He's talking really a lot about the Ten Commandments. You know what I'm talking about? Like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, or thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, whatever version you read, like that kind of encompasses all of that. And he said we had the best rule system that you could possibly have to try to earn your way to God. We had that. We tried that. We tried that. And look at what he says after that. He says, convinced that no human being can please God by self-improvement. You know what they realized in that moment of trying to live out these 10 commandments, of trying to live out this religion kind of a gospel, trying to live some of that stuff out? Paul says, you know, we figured out that it didn't work. I can't do enough to earn God's love. Right? I already have God's love. I just got to accept it. Like it's already there for you. I mean, you don't have to do anything to earn it. It's already been done for you. You just have to accept it. And they realized that in that moment. And he says, convinced that no human being can please God by self-improvement. Listen, how many of you are bad at some things? Yeah. Like all the women raise their hand, but almost no men. Right? It shows you our culture right there. That's all right. I mean, I'm pretty good at everything I do. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not good at a lot of things. We're just not good. But here's the deal. Even if we get better at that, it doesn't make God love us more. Right? You may not be the best at reading. You may not be the best at prayer time. You may not be the best at having a relationship with Jesus. You might not just be the best at that. But even if you get any better, it doesn't make God love you more. And even if you get any worse, it doesn't make God love you less. And he goes on, he says, convinced that no human being can please God by self-improvement, we believed in Jesus. If you don't get anything else, that's what I want you to see. Is it's not about all of these things that you should or should not do. It's solely based on your belief in Jesus. We figured out that we couldn't earn our way, and we couldn't do enough for God's love. So you know what we did? We just believed in Jesus. We believed in Jesus as the Messiah so that we might be set right before God. Watch this. By trusting in the Messiah, not by trying to be good. And I read that whole passage out of the Message paraphrase just for that one line. Just for that one line. Because last week we talked about the difference between the two gospels. And our one-liner was, the gospel isn't you did, the gospel is Jesus did. Thank you for the 4 people who knew what I was talking about. The gospel isn't you did. It's not about what you do, what you can't do. It's not about what you trying to earn your way to God. The gospel isn't you did. The gospel is Jesus did. And he said that in chapter 1. And then he says almost the same thing in chapter 2. Right? It's not about trying. Look at what it says. It's set right before God by trusting in the Messiah. not by trying to do good. And then he finishes out in verse 19, he says this, what actually took place is this, and I love this. Don't you love when people actually tell you the truth about their life? I mean, I can make up some good stories about mine, and you would think my life is incredible, right? But if I told you the truth sometimes, you'd be like, oh, you're pretty much just like I am. You know, you're jacked up, you're messed up, you think the same thoughts I think. Like, I like it when people are just real. And Paul, I find a whole lot of comfort in this passage, because you're talking about Super Paul. Right? You're talking about a guy who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. Like this guy, if there's a guy who knows how to follow Jesus, it's Paul. Like he should have it down. He's on a whole nother level than me and you. Like he should have this stuff. But then this is what he says to us. He says, what actually took place is this. I tried keeping rules and working my head off to please God, and it didn't work. How many of you felt like that before? Don't raise your hand. Just you felt like that before. You try to do so much. I'm supposed to pray. I'm supposed to give. I'm supposed to read. I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to like everybody. I'm supposed to forgive people. Let me just tell you, when God tells me to forgive somebody who hurt me, I don't really like it. Can we just be honest with that? I mean, like sometimes I don't really want to do what Jesus is asking me to do. Like I'm just being real. Like some things come up and I'm like, no, I'd rather do the opposite of what you're trying to tell me to do right now. And it gets to that place and he says, we've tried keeping rules and we've tried working our head off to please God and it didn't work. So watch what he says after this. So I quit being a lawman. He quit living in this religion gospel. He quit living trying to do all the things that he could do to work his way up to earn God's love. And he realized in that moment that he already had God's love, so he had to turn into the person that God had already called him to be. And he says, I quit being a lawman so that I could be God's man. Man, that's my prayer for us, right? Is that we wouldn't be lawmen and we wouldn't be law women. Listen, nobody needs a place that's so condemning and so hurtful and that is so quick to tell you what you're doing wrong in your life. Nobody needs that, because how many of you know when you're doing something wrong in your life? Like it's pretty self-explanatory. Like you pretty much know it. You don't need anybody to tell you that. So how about we get a group of people who go, you know what, we don't need to be these lawmen who are trying to work our way to God and who are trying to earn God's love. How about we just be God's men? And we live from God's love. It's kind of the same thing we talked about last week. Is you don't live from or for God's approval. You live from God's approval. Right? You're already loved by God. You don't have to do all of this stuff to figure out, okay, if I do so much and if I do it really well, then God will love me so much more. No. Let's stop being lawmen and let's be God's man. Right? So my prayer is that all of us would figure out, okay, I want to be God's man. I want to be God's women. Like I want my heart to be set after the things of God. So how do we do that? And that's pretty much the question. And I realized in the scripture when I was reading through that Paul kind of gives us the secret. Right? How can you live in this relationship gospel? How can you live in this freedom from not having to do all of this stuff to try to earn God's love? How can you just live from God's love and be a God man? How can you do that? He pretty much tells us. Okay, but I just got to be honest with you for a second. Before I put this verse on the screen, I got to tell you that this isn't necessarily popular. Like this isn't the verse or the message that you speak to get a whole lot of more new people to the church. But this is the message that you give to encourage the people who are already in your church. Because here's the deal. I want you to live in absolute freedom. And Paul tells you how to live in absolute freedom. Because here's the deal. To understand where we're going right here, you got to understand what freedom is. Okay, because your definition for freedom might be different than mine. Because some people think, okay, well, freedom is being able to do whatever I want whenever I want to do it. Now, that's freedom. That's what I thought like as a teenager. I can't wait to be an adult because that's freedom. It didn't quite work out quite how I planned it to work out. There's a lot more of chains and stuff like that you gotta do. A lot. You know what I'm talking about. It gets a little crazy being an adult sometimes, right? It gets crazy being a student sometimes. It gets crazy being a kid sometimes because they got to live with their crazy parents. You see what I'm saying? Like the whole world's just jacked up. We're just messed up people. So I got to this place, and if freedom is doing whatever I want whenever I want to, if that's what freedom is, then freedom doesn't actually work. Let's just play this out, right? Because you're free. You're free to go out and apply for a credit card, right? You're free to do that. You're free to go and charge up whatever charges you want on that credit card to the limit that they tell you that you got. You're free to do that. But let me ask you this. Does doing that, right, your freedom, you're exercising that freedom, does that actually lead to freedom? No, it leads to bondage because you'll get a bill in the mail next month to prove it. Right? You'll be having to pay on this thing for 97 months for $25 a month because you just went out and you were free and you just did it, but it actually leads to bondage. So there are some things in our life that we're free to do that don't actually lead to freedom. They actually lead to bondage. Just think about that for a second. Like you're free to look at whatever website you want to look at. Like you can shut your door, you can go in a room all by yourself and you can pull up the website, whatever website you want to pull up. And you can look. But the moment that you exercise that freedom is the moment that you lose your freedom. Because in that moment is the actual moment that you're caught in bondage with an addiction. Right? You can drink whatever you want. You can smoke whatever you want. You can sleep with as many people as you want. You are free to do that. You are free to do whatever you want to do. But some of that stuff never leads to freedom. It always leads to bondage. So when we get to a place in our lives where we realize that freedom isn't necessarily doing just whatever we want to do, freedom is having a relationship with Jesus. Right? Because he's the creator and the maker of the universe. So he kind of knows what's going on. Right? So when we read the Bible and we're going, okay, I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't do this and I can't do this, and we go, oh my gosh, I can't even have a relationship with Jesus and have fun. Right? See, that's right. Listen, as a teenager, man, I was there. I can't even have a relationship with Jesus and do what I want because he tells me not to do the things that I want to do. But what we don't realize in that moment is God's laying out some stuff that he's going, hey, listen, you have the freedom to do these, but these things actually won't lead to freedom. They'll actually lead to bondage. And Jesus didn't die for you to live in bondage. Jesus died to set you free. So how do we live in freedom? And how do we be God's men and God's women? How do we do that? Paul kind of sums it up right here in this verse that it's just difficult to talk about. Right? It's difficult. Look at what he says. Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. He says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live. You want to know why we don't talk about it? Because we don't like it. Like, I don't like that verse. I'll be the first one to tell you, listen, I don't like it. Because what he's telling me to do is it's not about me and it's about Jesus. And what he's telling me is it's not about me, it's about other people. Like, how many of you like it to be about you? Like, I like things to be about me. Like, I like you to take me to breakfast. Like, I like that. Like, that will be good, and you pay for it. Like, I like that stuff. Like, it's good. I like when people talk about me, right? In a good way, not a bad way. Don't talk about me in a bad way. That's not nice. Man, be nice. Be like Jesus. So, like, I like that stuff. Like, I like when I'm the center of attention. Like, I like that, and you like it too. When the world revolves around you, like, I love that feeling. I like that. When I read this verse, I'm going, whoa. Man, I don't want to do that. Because when I do that, when I choose to do that, then I choose to put me on the back burner and put somebody else in first place. Let me just tell you something about when we read Scripture. Listen, this right here, this is deep. Okay, this is deep. Now, I need to tell you what deep is. Some people think deep in a message is like, it confuses the crap out of you so much so that when you leave, you have no earthly idea what we talked about in here, but you can walk out and you go, oh, man, that was deep. That was deep. Listen, it ain't good for you when you walk out clueless, and it ain't good for us when you walk out clueless. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not deep. What's deep is actually doing what Jesus called us to do. That's deep. Deep is love your neighbor as yourself and actually doing it. Because how many of you know your neighbor's jacked up? Right? You look at them and tell them that. Poke them in the side and say, hey, you jacked up, man. You jacked up. Listen, love your neighbor as yourself. That's deep when you can figure out how to do it. When Jesus tells you to forgive, we already talked about it. That's deep when you can figure out how to do it. See, the Bible, going into this deep realm, it isn't about how much information you know. The Bible isn't about you knowing a whole lot of information. The Bible is about it transforming your life. Because you know those people. You got those people that have the Bible memorized like backwards and forwards, front to back. They got it memorized. And you can go, hey, isn't there a scripture that says like this, and they can go, yes, there is one. It's in this verse, this, and they can quote it to you. They got it memorized, but they're still as mean as they've ever been. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, did you not apply any of what you read? Like you got so much knowledge, but you're not applying any of it. Listen, deep is when you figure something out and you have a little bit of information and it's actually doing what it says to do. Listen, so I don't need you to know the whole Bible back and forwards. I just need you to read it and actually do what it says. I think we would all work out a little bit better that way. Right? So when we get to this verse and we read it and it's like, I read that, I've been crucified with Christ and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. I can see how that would lead to freedom. That's good information, but I don't ever want to apply it. I'm just being honest with you. That's a hard verse to apply. But if you want to live in absolute freedom and you want to live being a God man or a God woman, this is the verse we got to apply. Look at what he says. Been crucified with Christ. I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And the life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me. Watch this. Who loved me and gave himself for me. And I read that and I was like, okay, I mean, how do we do that? Like, how does that work? And this came up right here, and this is your message in a sentence. If you taking notes or you want to take a picture of this, whatever it is, this is your message in a sentence right here. This is what I need you to get. The gospel in me is the reason I feel the gospel must come out of me. It's going to take just a minute for me to break that down, but I need you to get this. The gospel in me is the reason I feel that the gospel must go out of me. Okay, because if Paul says that I've been crucified with Christ, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. If that's true, and if that's the way to live in freedom, and if that's the way to not be a lawman but to be a God man, if that's the way, if I have to die to myself daily and put Jesus at the center and he lives in me, if that's where freedom comes from, then how many of you know you can't keep that to yourself? You can't get, if true freedom, if the ability to live in absolute freedom comes from having a relationship with Jesus and his presence in your life, if that's where true freedom comes from, it can't stay in us. It's got to go out. So the gospel in me is the reason that I feel that the gospel must come out of me, because if I've experienced the freedom that Jesus has for me in a relationship with him, dude, I want other people to experience that too. Man, we've seen that as a church. We've heard stories as a church. Man, I grew up in church, and they just pounded you and told you going to hell all the time, and the preacher just said, I'm going to give them hell every week. Listen, you get enough hell every week. But you need some hope. And Jesus is the hope. Jesus is the one thing that can get you through the week. Jesus is the one thing that can give you strength to make it through. Jesus is the one thing that can give you peace, that when your life is completely fallen apart, he is the one that shows up and that can mend it all back together. He is the one that when everything is going wrong and people are going, oh my gosh, I don't even know how you're living, like how are you even making it? He's the one that you always go back to, and he's the one that you go, you know what, I don't know what it is, I just feel like it's just Jesus. Because it's the gospel that lives in you. It's the reason that you think that the gospel should go out of you so that other people can experience the same thing that you've experienced, and it's freedom in a relationship with Jesus. I just want to end with this right here, telling you, going through this process with the new facility and the building and all that junk like that. How many of you ever built a house? You built a house? Yeah. I ain't doing that. Because there's a bunch of junk goes on that you got to deal with. Try to build your house the way that you want it to be. You know what I'm saying? I'll just stick with this. Like, this would be my only one, and we're done after that. So I think about this chair, and I'm looking at all the stuff we have to do and all the junk that we got to get prepared, and when do you order what, and when do you order this, and We got together with a bunch of people, and these are the chairs that we're going to get. Don't they look good? If you don't think so, don't say anything. Right? You can just choose not to sit on them. You can stand in the back for all I care. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Sit in a seat. We got them for you. Okay? But this is the seat that we're looking at getting. And I was like, you know what? The chairs in that auditorium, it's going to be one of our biggest expenses through this whole deal. And at church with you, we got a little thing that we cling to. It's kind of like a core belief that we have, and it's this: an empty seat is a big deal. It's a big deal. Every empty seat that you see in here is a big deal, because it represents one person that's not sitting in that seat hearing the message of Jesus and hearing how you don't have to live over here and earn God's love. He already loves you, and you just have to accept it. And every seat that's empty is a person not hearing that. And it's a person that's not hearing the message of Jesus, and that's a big deal. So here's my thought to you this morning. We've been in this campaign we've been calling Immeasurably More since the beginning of the year. We've had 2 big give days. Okay, and next big give day is June 5th. Okay, June 5th. Plug that in the back of your mind, June 5th. But we set a goal, and we said, okay, if we can get $100,000, I think we can kind of do what we need to do to the building and get it ready for us to use without us having to go into debt. Man, that's a good deal for me. Like, I like not going into debt. How about you? You like that? I mean, I would love to be completely debt-free. And we said if we can get $100,000, we believe that we can move into this thing and do it completely debt-free. And I got to thinking about these chairs, and I was like, you know, we need 350 of these chairs, right? To put in an auditorium, we need 350 of them. And it is comfy and cushy. How's your seat? Kind of hard? Mine's pretty comfy. So I did some math with a calculator. I'm not really good in my head doing math. This chair costs $49 with shipping and all that stuff. Like getting 350 of these chairs, getting to the facility for us to put them in, it comes out to be about $49 a chair. Okay, $49 a chair. So I just want to ask you really quick, just to think, how many people do you have in your family that you bring to church with you every week? Just think. Just think. And I'm not talking about maybe not just family. Like if you bring grandparents, if you bring friends, if you bring coworkers, if all of you come together and you come to church and you sit, how many people do you bring every single week to sit in chairs? Because this is my thought. I got to thinking, and I was like, okay, if we can get 210 people, okay, 210 people to give $245, that's 5 chairs. Okay, 5 times 49, I think that's $245. I think. If it's wrong, you blame my calculator. Don't blame me on that. If each person, if we get 210 people to buy 5 chairs, 210 people to give $245 on June 5th. Let me just tell you what we'll get. $51,450, and we will be above our $100,000 goal. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that great? Because here's what I found out. I found out that people want to give, they just don't know what to give to. Give to a chair. Because you're going to be sitting in it. Your family member is going to be sitting in it. And you know what? Somebody that you invite that hasn't gone to church for 40 years, and you just go, you know what? You just got to come check this thing out. You just got to. And they're going to show up, and they're going to sit in one, and they're going to meet the presence of Jesus. And in the presence of Jesus, there is freedom through a relationship, and they will start a relationship with Jesus in this chair. Let me just tell you, listen, I don't know about you, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm telling you my $245 that I'm going to give, like this is it. Like I'm going to give $245, Cheyenne's going to give $245. You with me? It comes out of the same checking account, but like 2 people have to get. So I don't even know what that is. I'm not good at math, but if we give $245, listen, that's well spent for a chance to somebody to come in and sit in this chair and meet Jesus and start a relationship, and their eternity's changed forever. Listen, I'll tell you something about my investment to this. That's the best $245 I can ever give, to buy those 5 chairs for 5 people to come in and meet Jesus and change their eternities forever. Listen, I'll do that for a chance for somebody to come in and do that, because that's what Jesus did for us. And he gave us life on the cross. He died for your sin. He died for my sin on the cross. He was buried and he rose on the 3rd day. He did all of that for a chance that you would say yes to a relationship with him. Do you see that? Do you get that? He did everything that he did for a chance that you would say yes.